Okay, hello everybody. I am here today to cover a whole bunch of stuff. I want to talk about some common misconceptions and things about interviewing. I had pulled some of this stuff off the internet, and I just thought it was really interesting. Where some people think that interviews are just plain dumb. So interviews are dumb. You can just use canned answers to fool an employer. And or worse than that, you can just go and you can make something up. Just make up everything and fool the employer and pass your interview and get the job. And the other thing that another big misconception that I want to talk about was that interviews only benefit extroverts. And then also I'd seen a couple of things talking about to how interviews interviewers are bad at interviewing. So that's what taints the whole process, and that's how they end up hiring the wrong people. So let's talk about some of this stuff. First of all, I just want to get into canned answers. Now, I have in my own podcast, this podcast, gone and talked about at length about the value of canned answers and how important it is to be able to bring something up at a moment's notice. So let's talk about it. First off, canned answers take so much effort to prepare. There's so much that goes into it. You have to go back and you have to study your resume. You have to know every single thing about your resume, every single place you worked. You want to be able to pull examples out of all the different jobs that you've had. And it takes effort. And it really takes effort too for people who have they've only worked at one place. I mean, there's a lot of older workers that are looking for work again now, and when you really consider, I mean, they're of that generation that may have only worked at one place. They hung their hat on the hook, and 40 years later they retired. And now they're out there looking for a job again. So you have to be able to break down some of those things. You have to be able to break down a place that you'd been at a long time and say, okay, well, I worked in 4 different departments, and consider that as 4 different jobs. And then, of course, the other challenge is for people who haven't worked a lot at all. So they do have to use a lot of examples from school or from projects or from whatever. So I mean, it's very difficult to prepare for canned answers, be able to prepare to create and be able to use examples. Yeah, canned answers too it takes a lot of effort to prepare them as well, because you have to really consider the employer. You have to study the employer too. You have to know what the employer is all about. You have to know what values they have. You have to know what they've done in the past. Anything you can find on the internet in your few or lengthy, whatever you want to do, but in your internet searching on companies, you really need to be able to figure out what the company is all about. You have to tailor this canned answer around some of their values as well. So, it's almost, I don't want to say it's a guessing game, but it's almost like you're being a detective and trying to figure out, just based on their past performance and what they've written in their job ad, what kind of values it is they're looking for when you're structuring your answer. And then there's a lot of self-awareness that goes into canned answers too. You have to consider yourself. Especially when you're preparing for questions that are related to conflict. I mean, you have to know what you would do. Obviously you know what you would have done or what you have done. But if you do come across a situation where you do have to come up with a hypothetical situation, and why would you do that, right? So let's say, if a very specific conflict question gets asked and you've never had that happen to you, I mean, the last thing you want to do is say, oh, well, I get along with everyone, so it's not a problem. Because, again, as I've said in previous episodes, you're not really answering the question. They want to know what you would do if. So if you do have to come up with some kind of hypothetical situation, you really need to be able to know yourself well enough. Like, look inward and see and really consider what you would do. And, there's a lot of preparation that goes into that. Canned answers are it's not easy stuff to do. And the one thing about canned answers that if you've done it properly, and if you've given a good answer, or the best answer that you think you can give, if you've done all that, then you really, if you're just making things up, like, I mean, not like as in making up hypotheticals, because you've already looked inward and you've come up with an answer that's relevant to you. But if you have just made things up, the follow-up questions will kill you. And that's why employers ask follow-up questions to these conflict sort of conflict questions or any of the other, your strengths, your weaknesses, anything that I've identified in my past episodes as being a canned answer. If you have made something up, and you will get caught in your own lie, because as soon as you get a follow-up question, you're like, I don't know, I didn't think that far ahead. And okay, maybe you can think on your feet, and maybe you can come up with something, and maybe whatever. But at the end of the day, you're going to stammer and stutter, and it's going to come off as you're not prepared. So either way, you stand a very good chance of not being moving on to the next part of an interview if you've just flat out made things up. With all this talk about canned answers, what's the benefit, right? I mean, canned answers are what they are. They are, you've gone out and you've done your research and you've prepared something to say. Now, the benefit of having canned answers is really twofold. Being able to deliver an answer quickly allows the conversation to keep moving. You don't want to be stuttering, like I said, stammering, and trying to think of something to say. You've already thought of something to say. So it keeps that flow going in the interview. And it shows that you're prepared. I mean, that's one of the biggest things. I mean, if you get a conflict question, I keep saying conflict questions because I just did an episode about conflict questions. But if you get a conflict question, like tell me about a time you had a problem with a coworker, and you're like, bam, this happened in this job that I had 10 years ago, and man, it stuck with me, and then you tell your story, right? It's just showing that you've gone back and you've taken the time to really dig into each of your jobs, and you've put a story together that makes sense and really identifies who you are as a person and what you would do in that situation, right? I mean, it's great. Canned answers are absolutely essential for any interview, and they keep, like I said, they keep the conversation moving, and they will allow an employer the time to ask follow, and really not just the time, but it'll give them the motivation to ask you a few follow-up questions, because if you've taken the time to give a good answer, they probably want to know a little bit more, and they're confident that you're, like, the interviewer is going to be confident that you can deliver, a proper follow-up answer. So again, keeps that conversation moving. It gives the interviewer more time to ask you questions. And I mean, canned answers are not silly. They're not stupid. They're not, they're not. You cannot easily manipulate an interviewer with canned answers. You have to do it properly, or else it's going to bite you when you get your follow-up questions. One of the other points that was in my little quick preamble here was about how interviews only benefit extroverts, and man, I can't even tell you how false that is. I mean, being an extrovert, maybe you're the life of a party sometime, but I'll tell you, in an interview scenario, because I'm pretty extroverted, I can talk to the wall, I can talk to anybody in a room, I'm perfectly comfortable to do that. But the issue in the interview scenario is that most people that are extroverted, they cannot hide. I mean, I can't, at least, hide my emotions. I mean, sometimes being in an interview is all about being measured and controlled, right? Well, if you react like I do to absolutely everything that people say, then it can really hurt you in an interview scenario. I mean, extroverts have a hard time being emotionless. They react to things without thinking, and their body language. I mean, body language is absolutely critical in a interview. So yeah, like I was saying, if you can't control your emotions, then you're really giving away your hand. If you get one of those questions, I've talked about this in other episodes too, but if you get one of those questions that's meant to be different, or meant to be to acquire information a different way, like those questions that you get, like tell me what kind of fruit you are, or tell me what kind of colors you identify with, all those kind of like Myers-Briggs kind of personality questions. I mean, a lot of places use these now. And so if you're going to react with a funny look or whatever to all these questions, then it's really going to hurt you as an extrovert in an interview. And then, of course, as I'm probably doing right now, extroverts have a really hard time a lot of times being succinct, get lost in our own stories. Like, I mean, I get teased all the time because I go, oh, well, Dave's telling a story again. It goes in circles. And sometimes it happens, And then when you talk about, if you want to link this too a little bit to the canned answer thing I was talking before too, I mean, if you can't tell a straight story, or you lose track, or whatever, I mean, it just hurts you in an interview. Um, and that's the point too. I mean, it's just, extroverts are more prone to rambling. Just they ramble on, and they just, they tell the great stories. Sometimes you sit and can be really entertained by them, but in an interview scenario, you only have so much time. You can't be in there for hours. So, how does this impact an interviewer? Maybe, well, if you're telling rambling stories, or if you can't finish what you're saying, or if you run out of time in an interview, it can project that you're not able to complete tasks on time. I know it's a bit of a reach, but sometimes that's what interviewers, in an interview, if you want to qualify um, certain things, if you want to put a value on certain things, I should say, it's, if you're gonna be evaluated on something, it can be, did you finish your story? Did you finish your story? Did it make sense? And then it can be projected into, well, if this person can't finish a story, then they may not be able to finish tasks on time, or they might need a lot of extra time because they waste time or whatever. I mean, sometimes you get marks for the stories you tell in interviews, not just because of the content, but because did you get finished? And it can be projected onto your job performance. If you can't finish a story, how are you going to finish the task? So I mean, I'm not saying that's fair sometimes, but that's sometimes how it works in interviews. They just, your demeanor, and again, I was talking about with extroverts, with your body language and stuff, that can kill you in an interview. Of course, it wouldn't be fair for me to talk all that time about doing interviews as an extrovert and not devote any time to talk about introverts in an interview situation. So I happen to think that introverts are uh, way more suited for interviewing than extroverts. Just my own opinion. You can take it for what it is. But introverts, stereotypically, and I am using some internet research for this stuff, so it's not, again, take it for what it is. But introverts typically will prepare more. They're going to do their research, I feel, more than extroverts. They're going to internalize more of what they learn. They're going to be able to, make lists and really study, because they're going to be afraid of having to deliver these things on a schedule, and they might have some anxiety about it, so they're going to really prepare for it way more than an extrovert. Extrovert just thinks they can fly by the seat of their pants, and they'll just BS their way through anything, right? And again, very general statements. Okay, I know a lot of extroverts that do a lot of research and put a lot of effort. Okay, but I'm just talking in generalities for the sake of for the sake of my episode here. But some of the stuff, it does hold true. Um, so another thing introverts should do, and usually do very well, is they prepare way more for typical questions. So canned answers, right? Just like what I was talking about before. So they're going to have, 6 or 7 things for each job that they've had, and they're going to be able to way easier than an extrovert. They're going to be able to deliver these things properly, and they're going to be able to make sense, and they're going to be able to impress the employer. They're going to be able to say in detail with examples a little bit better, perhaps, than an extrovert telling a story, that what they've been able to accomplish. And they'll be able to talk about their goals better. They'll be able to talk about their past experiences a little bit better. Now, another thing an extrovert or an introvert will probably do better is to handle those questions like the tell me about yourself. They're going to handle that better, because they don't just take it for granted that they can talk to anyone. They know, generally an introvert will know they're going to be a little bit uncomfortable talking about something like that. So they are going to have their answer prepared so well, and they're also going to prepare for follow-ups. They're going to think about, okay, what do I say when I say this, what am I going to say if they ask that? And they might have actually they might have some ideas of what follow-up questions would be. I mean, there is a downside to that too. I can't say that without saying that there is a downside to over preparing, right? If you try to anticipate every single follow-up question you're going to get, and then if you don't get it, it's going to really throw you. So I mean, yeah, pluses and minuses for everything, but in general, I feel that an introvert is going to be way more prepared for A, canned answers, and B, the answers where you have to be prepared for follow-ups. Another thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to introverts versus extroverts, it's in the time to shine questions. So in my previous episodes, I've talked about how there are certain kinds of questions that are time to shine questions, and there's just ones that aren't. Okay, like the tell me your greatest strengths. I mean, that's not supposed to be you give all your best ammunition, and I think an extrovert will want to maybe push it a little bit and say a little bit too much, and then when it comes time later in the interview to the why should we hire you kind of questions, that they might have used up all their best stuff, so they might refer back to other things that they've said in the past. Whereas I think an introvert perhaps will they'll know to measure it. They'll know to say, okay, if they ask me about my strengths, they're really only asking for a couple of things. So they know to stop once they've said those couple of things, and they have their time to shine things prepared, and they're going to know what to say. So they're still going to have ammunition. They're still going to have a lot of things to say, right? So I think that in general, introverts, we're going to take the preparation a lot more seriously for an interview. And like I was saying before too, when it comes to introverts, they will succeed in keeping the conversation moving because they're going to give short, concise, really detailed answers, and they're going to tell the interviewer everything they need to know in a short amount of time, which gives the interviewer more time to ask some follow-ups. And I think it's very important. I mean, if you go into an interview and the interviewer only gets to ask maybe 3 or 4 of the maybe 20 questions they wanted to ask because the interviewee wouldn't stop talking. It can be a problem. So I really fully believe. Oh, and sorry, and one more thing too. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm sort of going off the script today. Sorry, but another point that is very important is extrovert versus introvert. I mean, introverts are going to have questions to ask, and I've gone over it many times in my previous episodes. But having questions to ask the employer at the end of the interview is absolutely critical. And I think that an introvert will, if they allow the employer, like the interviewer, to talk more, they have more time, not more time, but they have more opportunity to write down questions. Like if you're an extrovert and you don't stop talking, and the interviewer doesn't get to say anything, then where are you going to pull any inspiration from to ask a question back? I mean, you haven't really had a two-sided conversation. Whereas somebody who's more prepared, if they're introverted, if they're more prepared, then there's so much time left over to really talk about the job at the end, and maybe the employer would have said a few things along the way that the interviewee would have time to scribble down and be able to ask at the end. So again, a huge disadvantage for extroverts if they're not prepared. I mean, I know I keep saying introvert, extrovert, but I mean, really what it comes down to is being prepared. And in my opinion, extroverts can more easily fall into the trap of not being prepared and just relying on their good people skills than an introvert that will actually know that they're going to have a little bit of anxiety and really prepare for their interview. So I don't know. Again, you can shoot your or you can have opinions about it. You can definitely share them with me. I'd love to hear what you have to say. If you are more of an introverted person, tell me about how you made it through an interview. Did you do the things I was saying? Did you prepare? Did you over prepare? Have you over prepared? And I can tell you as an extrovert, man, I know I've blown a few interviews going in being overconfident, thinking I already had the gig, and you stumble over things. So you got to learn the hard way sometimes, I suppose. But anyways, that's all I'm going to say about the introvert versus extrovert. But I think that from my original point when I first started here today, I think that it is definitely a myth that extroverts are more likely to succeed in interviews. 100%. I totally disagree with that. Extroverts can very easily fall into that trap of not being prepared. Okay, so if you remember way back to my preamble there, I was talking about, a popular opinion about people who don't like interviews is that people can just make things up. I think I've pretty well dispelled that already. I mean, you can see that, especially when I was talking about canned answers. I mean, there's a lot of effort that goes into to making them. And then the fact of just making something up. I mean, yes, sometimes you do have to make things up for an interview. You have to make up hypotheticals. If you just make things up and lie, okay, that's different. Yeah, okay. That's you're not going to keep that job anytime ever, because eventually the employer is going to realize that you are totally lying to them, and they're not going to trust you, right? But as far as making things up go, yeah, sure. I mean, it's not criticism. It's the truth. Sometimes you have to make stuff up for an interview to answer the questions properly. So you have to use a hypothetical situation. So that was that point that I just, before I forget to address it. Now the last point is about interviewers being bad at interviewing. So that's what makes interviews useless. Well, I mean, it's true. I'm not going to lie. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that either A, haven't interviewed people in a long time, or B, I mean, they always just sort of sucked at it. I mean, I've talked to managers in the past that they say, well, I always have a feeling about somebody. Like, I talk to them for 10 minutes and I already know if they're the right fit for the job. And, that's just the total wrong approach for any kind of interview, because people get nervous. You know what I mean? If you're if you go into the interview scared about the actual interview, then yeah, sometimes you're not going to maybe you don't give the best answers right at the beginning, but then you're a slow starter, right? Maybe if you're a slow starter in an interview and you get confident as it goes on, well, if the person's already going to write you off in the first 5 minutes, then that's not good for you. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but you can very easily, if you're prepared for your interview, you can very easily overcome a bad interviewer. If the person's not asking you questions, you can just bring it up in an interview. You can be like, listen, I have so much stuff I want to tell you. Can I just give you some highlights and just talk? I mean, you can take over that section of the interview. And then just like I was saying before, if you keep talking, then perhaps the interviewer will snap out of it a bit and they'll be able to ask you some decent follow-ups. I guess my point is, if they don't have a good list of prepared questions, you can force the issue a little bit as the interviewee, pardon me, by giving them information that can get them on track to ask proper follow-ups. So, I mean, that might seem like a bit of an obtuse concept, but if it's a job that you really want and the company is good, don't let the fact that there's a bad interviewer, ruin it for you. I mean, you can always impress an interviewer that maybe isn't experienced or hasn't interviewed in a while. You can always impress them with your preparation. I mean, that's number one, right? I mean, if you're prepared, you can impress somebody no matter whether or not they're asking good questions or bad questions. So, I mean, that's a bit of a myth too, that bad interviewers, that they can prevent you from getting a job. If you're prepared for an interview, then you can be in a position to get the job. Now, and I could do a whole nother episode about what to do about inappropriate interviewers, because those are out there too. I did talk a little bit in a previous episode about what to do with inappropriate questions. I'm not going to go into it too much now, but I mean, that's just to say that, okay, if it's a company that you really want to work for, but you're getting an idea about the culture, a negative culture with a bad interviewer, that's different. That's when you really have to do it's gut check time and figure out whether you actually still want to work there or not. If you go into a company that you want to work for and you have an interviewer that isn't very good, I mean, don't let that taint your whole outlook on the company. Just go with your game plan, and you can overcome a bad interviewer and still get a job that you may love. I know I rambled on a lot today about these things, but let's just do a quick recap here. The things that I sort of touched on today, canned answers, how you can fool an employer. You can never fool an employer if you give a bad canned answer, I guess, or if you're not prepared, an employer is going to be able to tell. So, using canned answers is to your benefit, and if you lie, then the follow-up questions will kill you. So that's canned answers are a very important part of interviewing. Making things up, well, yeah, like I mentioned, you have to make things up sometimes. You have to make up hypotheticals to get your point across and get your personality across. I think I talked at length about how interviews do not just benefit, interviewers only benefit extroverts. And I just to be fair, like I said, I went into some stuff about introverts too. But extroverts don't always do great at interviews, and so that myth is not true. And then interviewers being bad, well, you're in the driver's seat in your interview, and you can change the scope of the interview by how prepared you are. So that myth there, no bad interviewer is going to ruin your chance to get the job. So that's all for today. I know I talked at length about some stuff. Hopefully I got some of it across. Listen, if you're job searching, make sure you put your best effort in, and hopefully something will happen for you. You'll get that dream job. And if you're not job searching and you happen to listen to this, well, thanks a lot. Pass it on to somebody who might benefit from some of my content. So have a great day, and until next time.